Just sign it, Ethan said. I heard my husband's voice through the operating room doors while I was still on the table. A doctor answered, sharp and tense. Mr. Morneau, we still have options. Machines beeped around me. Someone adjusted the mask over my face. I tried to move my fingers, tried to scream, but my body wouldn't listen. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Then Ethan said, colder this time, she wouldn't want to suffer, just sign it. A tear slid down the side of my face. One of the nurses saw it. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for half a second her hand froze over the IV line. Then Ethan's phone rang in the hallway. He didn't lower his voice enough. Yes, he said, the policy is active, 600,000. That was when I understood. My husband wasn't only deciding whether I lived. He was already asking what my death was worth. I was 26 years old, and until that morning I thought the worst thing happening to me was emergency abdominal surgery. Ethan had kissed my forehead before they wheeled me back and whispered, I'll handle everything. I believed him. For 2 years I had helped him keep his business alive. I had emptied my savings, ignored my sister Sophia's warnings, and signed whatever financial forms he put in front of me because he always said, married couples protect each other. 6 months earlier, he had convinced me to raise my life insurance policy. Just responsible planning, he told me. Now I was lying under surgical lights, hearing him discuss that same policy before anyone had even told him I was gone. A nurse squeezed my hand once, hard enough that I knew she wanted me to notice. Outside the doors, voices rose. That authorization wasn't in the chart before, someone said. Ethan muttered something I couldn't catch. Then a doctor rushed back into the room, holding papers in one hand. His voice cut through the noise. Why was this DNR signed less than 10 minutes ago? When I woke up, the room was dark except for the glow of monitors beside my bed. My throat burned. My stomach felt like it had been ripped open and stitched together with wire. Every breath hurt. Stella. Ethan stood up so quickly from the chair beside my ICU bed that it almost tipped over. His eyes were red like he'd been crying for hours. You scared me to death, he whispered, grabbing my hand. The doctors said we almost lost you. I stared at him. All I could hear was his voice in the hallway. Just sign it. A nurse stepped into the room to check my IVs. Ethan immediately straightened his posture. She wouldn't want extreme measures again if this happens, he told the nurse softly. She's always been clear about that. I forced out a raspy whisper. I never said that. The nurse paused. Ethan laughed nervously. Baby, you're confused, you just got out of surgery. After the nurse left, his expression changed almost instantly. You need to stop stressing yourself out, he said quietly. Anesthesia can make people imagine things. I heard you, I whispered. Hear what? The insurance call. For the first time since I woke up, he looked away. Only for a second. But I saw it. Then he leaned forward and kissed my forehead too quickly. You almost died, Stella. Don't do this right now. Over the next day, little things stopped making sense. Ethan refused to let me see my phone because he said I needed rest. He intercepted questions from nurses before I could answer them myself. Every time I mentioned paperwork or surgery details, he redirected the conversation. You need to focus on healing. You're overwhelmed. You're remembering things wrong. And the worst part was that part of me wanted to believe him. Ethan had always handled everything. Bills, insurance, taxes, even legal documents. A few months ago, he'd slid a stack of papers across the kitchen table and said they were routine updates. I signed them without reading most of them. Now I couldn't stop thinking about it. Late that night, while Ethan was in the cafeteria, the same ICU nurse quietly entered my room. She checked the hallway before speaking. Your chart was flagged, she said under her breath. There was an unusual authorization issue during surgery. My pulse monitor sped up. What kind of issue? She hesitated. I probably shouldn't say more. The door handle moved slightly outside. The nurse quickly adjusted my blanket like nothing had happened. Ethan walked back in carrying coffee. "What are you two talking about?" "Pain management," the nurse answered smoothly. He waited until she left before turning toward me again. "You almost died," he snapped suddenly. "Why are you acting like I did something wrong?" His voice was sharp enough that I flinched. But the second another nurse passed by the doorway, his entire face softened again. He sat beside me and stroked my hair like the outburst never happened. A few minutes later, he left to take a phone call. The ICU nurse returned immediately. Without a word, she slipped a folded photocopy beneath my blanket. Then she walked out. My hands shook as I opened it. At the top of the page were the words, "Do not resuscitate authorization." And near the bottom, Ethan's signature. Timestamped 30 minutes before my complications even started. I waited until the next morning to touch the form again. My hands were trembling so badly that it took 3 tries to unlock my phone and take a picture of it. Then I opened the one contact Ethan hated seeing on my screen. "Sophia." My older sister answered immediately. "Stella." The second she heard my voice crack, her tone changed. "What happened?" "Please come to the hospital." Less than an hour later, Sophia stormed into my ICU room still wearing her work badge around her neck. The second she saw the paper in my hands, her face drained of color. "What is this?" "I think Ethan tried to." "No," she cut in, furious already. "No, no, no." Before I could stop her, she marched straight out into the hallway demanding to speak with hospital administration. Within minutes, nurses, a floor supervisor, and a hospital legal representative were crowded into a private conference room while I sat in a wheelchair beside Sophia. The atmosphere shifted the second they saw the photocopy. One administrator frowned. "Mrs. Morneau, did you personally request this authorization?" "No," I said. Another staff member exchanged nervous looks with the nurse from ICU. Then a billing employee quietly spoke up from the corner. "There's something else," she admitted. "Your husband kept calling the insurance company during surgery." The room went silent. "He asked how quickly life insurance claims are processed," she continued. "I overheard him asking whether payouts could be delayed by active investigations." Sophia slammed her hand against the table. He was pricing her death before surgery was even over. The door suddenly opened. Ethan walked in. For 1 second, genuine panic flashed across his face when he saw the room full of staff. Then he recovered instantly. "Stella," he said carefully, "why is your sister involved in this?" Sophia stood up so fast her chair screeched across the floor. "Because somebody has to protect her from you." Ethan scoffed. "She's medicated, you're feeding paranoia into her head." "You signed a DNR she never agreed to," Sophia shot back. "It was an emergency decision." "Then why were you asking about $600,000? His jaw tightened. The hospital administrator stepped in before the argument exploded further. "Mr. Morneau," she said cautiously, "we also became aware of financial concerns involving your business." I turned toward him slowly. "What financial concerns?" He didn't answer immediately. And that silence told me more than words could. The administrator continued carefully. "There appear to be active creditor lawsuits attached to jointly held assets." My stomach dropped. "What?" Sophia looked horrified. "You didn't know." Ethan finally snapped. "I was handling it." "By putting debt against our house," I whispered. He pointed at Sophia angrily. "This is exactly why I kept her away from you." That sentence hit harder than anything else. Because it was true. He had kept me away from everyone. The room had gone completely quiet now. Even the hospital staff looked uncomfortable. For the first time since surgery, I noticed people watching Ethan differently. Not like a worried husband. Like a possible threat. Then the hospital administrator opened a folder in front of her and looked directly at him. "Mr. Morneau," she said slowly, Why did you ask if her death certificate could be expedited? By the next morning, Ethan was no longer allowed to make medical decisions for me. A hospital attorney informed me that all emergency authorizations connected to my care were being temporarily suspended pending investigation. When Ethan found out, he exploded. My phone filled with voicemails within an hour. This is getting out of control, Stella. You're letting your sister poison you against me. Call me back right now. Then the messages got uglier. You're ruining everything. Sophia sat beside my hospital bed, listening to one of them play through speakerphone. Her expression hardened with every word. He's scared, she said quietly. No, I whispered, he's angry. That afternoon, Sophia brought her laptop and several printed bank statements into my room. You need to see this before anyone else explains it to you. The deeper we looked, the worse it became. Over $400,000 in debt. Business accounts frozen days before my surgery. Late notices from lenders I had never heard of. Then Sophia opened a scanned insurance document. My chest tightened instantly. 6 months earlier, my life insurance coverage had been increased from $100,000 to $600,000. Primary beneficiary, Ethan Morneau. I never agreed to this amount, I said. Sophia looked at me carefully. You signed the amendment. I already knew. Routine paperwork. Responsible planning. Protecting each other. Every memory suddenly felt contaminated. Later that evening, 2 hospital investigators interviewed members of the surgical team outside my room. Through the cracked door, I heard fragments of conversation. He was unusually aggressive. He kept asking whether further intervention was necessary. One doctor refused to stop treatment because her condition was still recoverable. Recoverable. The word made my stomach twist. Not dying. Recoverable. A nurse eventually admitted that Ethan had repeatedly pressured staff to honor the rushed DNR, while surgeons were still actively stabilizing me. That was the moment everything connected. The insurance calls, the debt, the paperwork, the isolation from my family. This wasn't panic from a desperate husband. It was preparation from someone expecting a payout. That night, chaos erupted outside my room. Ethan had shown up demanding to see me. You can't keep me away from my wife, he shouted down the hallway. A security guard blocked him near the nurse's station. Sir, you need to leave. I have rights. You no longer have medical authority here. Then Ethan yelled the sentence that made the entire floor go silent. You people cost me everything. The second the words left his mouth, even he realized what he had said. 2 nurses exchanged stunned looks. A hospital attorney immediately stepped away to make a phone call. Security escorted Ethan toward the elevators while he continued shouting. Half an hour later, my phone rang from an unknown number. Mrs. Morneau, a calm male voice asked. Yes. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm an investigator with your life insurance provider. My grip tightened around the phone. There's something you need to know, he said. I stopped breathing. Your husband filed an initial claim before your surgery was even finished. Daniel Reeves arrived at the hospital the next afternoon, carrying a thin black folder that somehow looked heavier than anything I'd seen since surgery. Sophia sat beside my bed with her arms crossed while he introduced himself. I'm very sorry for what you've been through, Mrs. Morneau, he said carefully, but after reviewing the timeline, we believed you should hear this directly. He opened the folder. Phone logs, claim records, email printouts. He contacted the insurance company before your complications escalated, Daniel explained. At first, we assumed he was a distressed spouse preparing for the worst. But, Sophia asked sharply. Daniel slid a printed email across my tray table. My stomach dropped when I saw Ethan's name. I need payout processing, completed immediately due to pending creditor action. The message had been sent 3 days before my surgery. More documents followed. Ethan asking whether active lawsuits could seize insurance money. Ethan asking how long investigations delayed payment. Ethan asking whether spouses could receive partial funds before probate closed. My hands started shaking. He already knew exactly where the money was going, Sophia said quietly. Daniel nodded once, to settle business debts and avoid bankruptcy proceedings. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then I whispered the question I already knew the answer to. Did he think I was going to die? Daniel hesitated before answering. We consulted independent medical reviewers. Your surgery carried risks, but survival rates were high. Your condition became critical during complications, but according to the surgical team, there was still a strong possibility of recovery when the DNR was presented. Recoverable. Again that word. A surgeon later confirmed the rest himself. Ethan had added emergency authorization forms into routine intake paperwork before surgery. During the complications, he aggressively pushed for the DNR to be honored before doctors exhausted treatment options. One physician refused. One nurse delayed final processing because something about Ethan's behavior felt wrong. Those minutes kept me alive long enough for the surgeons to stabilize me. When the nurse visited me after her shift ended, I broke down crying before she even reached the bed. You believed me, I whispered. She squeezed my hand gently. Something didn't feel right. I realized then that strangers had fought harder for my life than my own husband had. 2 weeks later, I gave a formal statement to police investigators. Ethan sat across the room during part of the interview, looking exhausted and cornered instead of confident. Sophia lost control the moment detectives played the insurance call timestamps. You tried to cash out her death while she was still in surgery, she shouted. Ethan rubbed both hands over his face. I was being realistic. Realistic, Sophia snapped. You filed paperwork before she was even out of the operating room. Detectives placed printed records in front of him one by one. The DNR timestamp. The insurance inquiry. The early claim submission. The debt notices. Eventually, Ethan stopped talking completely. That silence said more than every excuse combined. Once the investigation became public, everything around him collapsed fast. Creditors turned on him. Former business partners denied involvement. The insurance company froze every active policy connected to his name. Friends I thought had abandoned me started reaching out after learning Ethan had been intercepting messages and telling people I was mentally unstable and under too much stress to maintain relationships. The isolation I blamed myself for suddenly made sense. I filed for divorce before I was even fully recovered. Sophia helped me regain control of my finances, my medical records, and every account Ethan had managed. The first time I signed paperwork without fear in the back of my mind, I nearly cried from relief. Months later, I stood at a hospital ethics seminar beside the same nurse who had squeezed my hand in the operating room. I spoke about patient advocacy, medical consent, and how easily trust can become a weapon in the wrong hands. By then, Ethan was awaiting trial for insurance fraud conspiracy and unlawful medical coercion. His business was gone. His assets were frozen. And the $600,000 he nearly traded my life for was something he would never touch. I moved into a small apartment near Sophia after my recovery. Quiet mornings, locked doors, no hidden paperwork waiting on kitchen tables. For the first time in years, my life actually felt like mine. And every now and then, I still think about that moment on the operating table when I heard Ethan say, "Just sign it." He thought that was the moment he won. But the man who tried to profit from my death lost everything the moment I survived.